back a fond memory of fresh toasted bread piled high with salami and melted cheese so thick it made his mouth water. Locals meandered up and down sidewalks on the sunny Saturday afternoon, dined al fresco on sidewalk patios, and rested on shade-drenched benches. Hikers, obvious by their backpacks and sweat-stained t-shirts, entered Appalachian Outfitters, no doubt to grab supplies and restock their food packs. In short, the town appeared exactly as it had last time he'd been here. A year ago, he'd come off the trail seeking a home-cooked meal and a decent bed. Ideas he could get behind today after his 4-hour trip turned into 6 due to extensive road construction on 75 and an accident on 40. When he reached the other side of town, he accelerated, following the road that ran alongside the meandering river. He passed the campground and a few more businesses, a clinic, a mercantile, a flower shop, all housed in old homes. He continued, heading to the far side of town where the houses thinned and property stretched out, low and hilly. He was a day early for his interview, but he couldn't resist another peek at the quaint horse ranch where he hoped to hire on. After being one of the many trainers on a large operation, he was eager for the challenge of something new, something smaller. And this pretty little town, nestled in the Appalachian Mountains, fit the bill. The smell of pine and mowed grass teased his senses as his eyes feasted on the sweeping panorama of majestic blue-green mountains. Yep, he could settle here for a while. Up ahead, the modest wooden sign came into view. The stables at Wildflower Falls. When he came to the gravel drive, he turned. Wouldn't hurt to check in. Maybe he could even get the interview over with, and then he could start searching for a place to rent. He wouldn't need much. A bed and a small kitchen. Plumbing would be a plus. The driveway wound between fenced-in pastures toward a 2-story farmhouse. A red barn sat behind the house to the left. A bay mare watched him pass by while her foal wandered off toward a copse of trees. A moment later, he pulled up behind a beige Tahoe and turned off his motorcycle. His back muscles protested as he dismounted the bike and removed his helmet. He stretched. He wasn't 25 anymore. In fact, he'd passed that milestone almost a decade ago, though it hardly seemed possible. A squirrel nattered in the sudden quiet. A breeze whispered through the treetops and cooled the back of his neck. He glanced down at his attire. Gray tee, worn jeans, boots. A little grungy, but he'd be riding horses, not sitting behind a desk. 2 quick leaps had him up on the big front porch. He rapped on the screen door's wooden frame and waited. Nice house, if old. Someone had kept it up. The porch rails had a fresh coat of white paint, and the chairs were clean and ready for occupants. When a second knock proved ineffective, he headed back down the steps and turned toward the barn. A Denali sat way off in the distance, beyond the red barn. Ms. Simpson, who he'd met the summer before and recently exchanged several emails with, was likely tending to her horses. He followed the well-worn path, taking note of the hilly pasture behind the barn that ended at a steep, sloped mountain. A few horses grazed nearby, a chestnut, a palomino, and a bay, all sporting healthy, shiny coats. Ears forward, eyes soft, they turned his way as he neared. Gunner slipped inside the open barn door and took a second for his eyes to adjust. Then he opened his mouth to call out, but the sight at the other end of the barn snatched the words from his tongue. A petite woman stood at the edge of a window, peering through a pair of binoculars. "Come on, turn around." This was not the woman he'd met last summer. This one was much younger, for starters. Beyond the window, a man inspected a raised piece of land that must be the new stable in the works. Not her husband, he assumed, as she surely would have no reason to spy on him. He cleared his throat. The woman squeaked, bumped her head on the window frame, and whirled. The binoculars clunked to the ground. Wide, green eyes fastened on him. "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you." She pressed a palm to her chest as a pretty blush crawled into her cheeks. "I was just checking on the, She kicked the binoculars aside, mashing her lips together. "There was an, you know. Anyway, can I help you? Are you here about boarding a horse?" He barely kept his lips from twitching. She was pretty cute, all flustered like that. Nobody blushed like a redhead. "Gunner Dawson. I have an appointment with Ms. Simpson tomorrow, but I got into town early. Thought I'd stop by and check out."